I think it's worth pointing out too that Mediatown, and correct me or add detail to this, Ashraf, you have teams, the movement is so restricted at times, but you have teams in various places. So you were able to kind of fill in every side of many of these stories. I think that's an important point. One thing, Kavitha, that you said to me when we talked about this, is you were seeing, and I think, I didn't think of it this way when I first watched the film, and then after you and I were talking, I watched it again. You were seeing these various patterns of attack, and we're hoping to find incidents that provided all of these visual and sort of witness testimony, so you could piece something together visually that were representative of these various patterns that you were seeing. Can you talk a little bit about those patterns of civilian harm and how these fit into those patterns?
Sure. I
Okay, this is
mean, oh no,
okay.
no,
Go
no,
ahead. No, go ahead. Go ahead.
no, no. I just talked a
No,
bunch.
no,
I
no.
want you to talk.
You're okay. It is okay.
I guess the main thing, yeah. So it was the film itself. I think the craziest part of it is that each of the four cases we show, these attacks, happened from December 11th to January 29th. So it's just a little over a month time span, right? But each of these cases was really emblematic of what was happening, what we were seeing happening in the first few months, but also obviously what's still happening. But I think the thing that really sticks out to me when we were finished, when we were wrapping it up, the film, which was around we were beginning to lock the film before it was going into post production and towards the middle or end of May, and the that was what in the middle of May of last year was when Israeli forces invaded Rafah, which was Biden's so-called red line, and when the Biden administration didn't kind of really forcefully do anything after that. And when I say forcefully, I mean there were many things the Biden administration could have done to enforce their so-called red line, and they didn't. To me, as an outside observer, it felt like that was when everything went completely off the rails. Like you could not, as an outside observer, like you could not really, it was harder to keep track of the patterns of civilian harm in a way, because all of a sudden, I think the Israeli military knew that they already were getting away with so many different things because the Biden administration was letting them, and not enforcing both international and domestic law. And when Rafah happened, it was clear that they could do it to an even more extreme degree. And I say all of that because all of the attacks in the film, they are representative of what we're seeing and what we continue to see, but it was so much worse after that. And it's been so much, yeah.
But it's an enormous airstrike. It's basically what appears to be a targeted killing. And the third case, the Saleh family.
Yeah, so it's a massive airstrike, and the reason we picked, and one of the things about that airstrike. So obviously there's been countless airstrikes at this point, but with that particular one, the what really strikes me about it is that there wasn't a lot of reporting on it. The only real media coverage was from Al Jazeera Arabic, and I think it was actually the Mediatown news crews who filmed that. And this was over 100 minimum, over 104 are the number of names that we have, but it's upwards of 200 because there's still bodies under the rubble. And in this case, that's a massive airstrike. I think like if you like for something of that scale, the satellite imagery was really grainy for that particular day and after, and so it was hard to kind of be able to find a crater size. But when that many people are killed, that there's a high likelihood that it was a 2,000-pound bomb, right? This was a big residential building. And the Israeli military at no point put out a statement for a strike like that. You would think they were targeting somebody incredibly high level, not that it ever excuses that kind of civilian harm. But you would think that it would be somebody like that. They would normally put out some kind of statement saying that. Nope, nothing of the sort. When we asked them, they didn't reply. So in that case, that particular airstrike, in terms of like a pattern of civilian harm, it's one of these that it's either indiscriminate bombing of a civilian population, which is a war crime, or it's a targeted killing of civilians because you know that this is a residential building. They know how many people are in it. This airstrike was just before dawn, so they knew people were sleeping, particularly children. And so in terms of pattern of harm, it really showcases these like massive airstrikes where more than 100 people civilians were killed over and over and over. Yeah.
You collaborated not only with Mediatown and multiple cinematographers that were part of Mediatown, but also Forensic Architecture, Airwars, Earshot. I'd love to hear just a little bit more. I mean, many people are quite intimidated of that level of collaboration. I'd love to hear how it worked for you guys and what was gained through that complicated collaboration. Maybe Laila, you could start with that, being the wrangler of all the pieces.
Sure. I think it was really important to kind of get a sense of where this airstrike stood in terms of the bigger picture of airstrikes, as Kavitha mentioned. I mean, especially since we stopped reporting. I mean, this is undoubtedly the biggest reason people are being killed, and it's killing the most people. So it was really important to kind of work with Airwars, which is an incredible nonprofit news organization that has been working for years and analyzing air wars all around the world, whether it's Iraq or Syria or, Gaza now, which has really taken up the bulk of their work. But they're also looking at Yemen, especially as the US has kind of ramped up its airstrikes there. And we worked with them to kind of analyze how that airstrike compares to other airstrikes and also to other conflicts. So they said, it far exceeds in terms of air power, the sheer kind of power of the weapons, the number of bombs being used, the US air campaign in Mosul and Raqqa, which were kind of the most intense air campaigns. And they also have a team of researchers who compiled the list of names of the Salem family. So they kind of helped bulk up that reporting that we were already working on. In terms of forensic architecture and Earshot, it was really focused on the killing of Hind Rajab and her family. So it was a very detailed, very careful investigation in which they worked with some of the footage taken by our own Al Jazeera crews, some of the aftermath taken by Mediatown and others, and worked to reconstruct the position of Hind Rajab's family car, of the gas station where they were, and of the tank where it was, to kind of conclude the number of bullets that were fired, bullet holes. I think it ended up being like 335 bullet holes directed at the car, as well as where the tank would have been positioned. And the fact that, given that it was a Merkava tank, the fact that the soldiers could likely see who they were shooting at, which is like this unarmed family trying to go on their way. And I think it was just so powerful for people. And then same with Earshot, just using audio from the phone calls of Hind and her cousin, where they could hear the bullets to determine what kind of weapon was likely used. So it was important. I mean, we see with any kind of allegation against the Israeli military, sort of campaigns to try to delegitimize and discredit any reporting that points to them being behind those killings. So it was important that everything we did was bulletproof in terms of the journalism, multiple eyewitnesses, survivors, forensic evidence, satellite imagery, WhatsApp messages, as Kavitha mentioned, phone calls. Even with the execution, I mean, we didn't want to re-traumatize the family that had survived, so we ended up counting on Sanad, which is Al Jazeera's open source investigative unit, to collect the testimony that they had already gotten from the survivors. So, but we found other survivors and witnesses who we later on went and interviewed for this film. So it's important to keep in mind some of the ethics of this kind of reporting, not re-traumatizing people, not making them retell the most horrifying experiences of their life again unnecessarily, but to make sure that any piece of evidence that was out there, we got our hands on to bulk up that reporting.
I think what really sticks out too with this piece is it's like you're marrying that very technical examination and forensics with this footage that is like so emotional and just seeing coverage that really pulls you into the world in a way that, you know, it stands out for that.